is Kristen Nevedal. I apologize for starting a few minutes late, and welcome to the Local Jurisdiction Assistance Grant Program meeting. We're going to talk about direct grant development today and fee waiver development. With us, we have Nina Holloway, who's helping us with our live stream and our administration for the webinar, and Program Administrator William Riley. So thanks to the staff for making this happen. We've got quite a few people joining. Numbers are slowing down a little bit, but we do have great attendance. I'm going to go ahead and get started because we're running just a few minutes behind, but we have a few slides just to talk about process and agenda. So I think everyone should be able to join before we get into the kind of the meat of the discussion, so to speak. All right. Agenda, we're going to do our best to stay on agenda. We're already 2 minutes behind in joining the webinar. My apologies for that. Fully on me for being a little bit tardy today. From 3:35 to 4, so just a moment here, we'll provide an overview of the direct grant program, project allowances that were outlined for the direct grant program, and we'll talk a bit about the fee waiver program that's folded into the direct grant opportunity. We also are going to spend some time then after the overview, breaking things up into a series of public comment opportunities. So what I mean by that is we'll be then going back to have about 15 minutes for the public to comment about qualifying criteria. And then we'll move from there to have another 15 minutes of public comment to hear ideas about maximum direct grant award amounts, payment terms, payment schedules, and other fun topic. We'll spend about 15 minutes taking input on possible benefits to equity eligible applicants. And then we'll close it out having a 15-minute discussion or public comment period about fee waivers. And for each of those kind of rounds of input, public comment, we will provide a little bit of background. So hopefully we can stay on schedule and our timing isn't too ambitious. So how to participate in today's meeting. Everyone should have access to the Q&A chat unless you're on a dial-in device. If you're on the Zoom app, you'll be located, the chat feature is located in the toolbar. It is that little chat box that says Q&A. Just click on it. It will give you a typing box and you can send questions or comments into staff here at the Mendocino Cannabis Department. No one else will see your comments, and we will do our best to try to address those if we can as they come in through the course of the presentation. We have been, the last few presentations, been flooded with questions and comments, so we haven't been able to get to everyone. But we are taking notes, and this is probably won't be the only development meeting. And so we'll probably come back and have some more discussion based on what we hear today. So I wouldn't panic. It's not your only opportunity to provide input on the development of this program. When we do get to public comment period, we'll ask folks to use the raise hand feature. It's also located in the toolbar, generally to the left of the Q&A feature. It just looks like a little hand. If you click that, it will raise your hand. If you click it again, it will lower your hand. If you're calling in, you can use the *9 feature on your phone to raise your hand and to lower your hand. Mute feature is in the bottom left of your screen. In most cases, it has a little microphone labeled mute if you're on the Zoom app. And if you're calling in to mute and unmute, it's *6. Again, we'll have a lot of time for, I should say, public comment. We might be able to answer some questions, but we haven't developed anything yet. So we're really trying to see what the public needs out of this, or applicants and permit holders need out of this grant program, so we can start crafting, hopefully, a meaningful policy manual. So it's the goal of today's meeting. Gather information. I can't waste a moment or a public meeting moment and not have important dates show up. So here you go. You're all getting them again. You'll see them again on Friday for those of you who attend Friday's meeting as well. So this Friday, we'll have our weekly public meeting. The topic will be Vegetation Modification. February 28th, we did push out the portal notification date, so we are going to be sending a lot of notifications to eligible corrections portal applicants. And so we'll be kicking off the 30-day notification period on the 28th. That portal will open on March 28th, and then it will close on April 28th. And then just so as to not create confusion, we have listed the public meetings on here for every Friday in March. They will go on into April, is the plan, but we just ran out of room on the slides. We're sticking with March dates. And for those of you interested in the local equity program, please know that that meeting for March is scheduled for March 16th at this time. It's also on a Wednesday. Okay, let's talk Direct Grant Assistance Program. The Local Jurisdiction Assistance Grant Program provided the county the opportunity to apply for direct grant funds. So direct grant funds, and I should say fee waivers, it's all in one pool. We line itemed in that application and were approved for $10,473,468 that the county can award to applicants and permit holders that qualify, direct grants and fee waivers. The deadline for the county to get that funding out to qualified applicants and permit holders is December 31st of 2025. As I mentioned before, the funding opportunities include fee waivers and direct grants that provide assistance with meeting Sequa requirements, improving air quality and reducing greenhouse gas emissions, potentially remediation and relocation projects to an environmentally superior location, and projects related to hydrology and water quality. We'll talk about those in a little more depth in the coming slides. We're hoping that we'll be able to make applications available by July 21st. We have been working with informational services on timing and putting together an electronic portal to hopefully make the application process easier for all parties, those providing information and the department in receiving it. We are looking at conducting the processing internally for these currently, right? I'm not saying that things might not change, but that is what the direction we're leaning currently is, that we would process the fee waivers and the direct grants in-house, so to speak, within the department. Fee waivers. For the term fee waivers, I'm really going to focus here on this slide on fees that are specific to county agencies, right? When we think fee waivers, especially in the realm of the equity program, fee waivers have been used for county permits. When we think about local jurisdiction assistance grant program permits that might be eligible for fee waivers under the LJAGP, fee waiver program might include something like your Appendix G processing fee, because they're supposed to be directly related to Sequa compliance, right? Special inspection fees might also fit the bill, especially if that special inspection fee is requested in relationship to a sensitive species habitat review, right? That could tie in as an applicable fee waiver. Grading permits to bring previously existing structures that are on graded flats and or gardens into compliance to meet your Sql requirements, or grading permits associated with lake and streamlet alteration agreement work orders or projects that you've been approved and need to conduct. There's multiple ways that grading permits might qualify for fee waivers under this program, and even possibly demolition permits, especially if you're moving a building or structures of any type outside of a streamside management area, for example, right? This is a good program to apply for a fee waiver for that type of a permit. And there may be others that we haven't considered here, but that also might be mentioned along the way in this presentation, or might come up with projects associated further in the presentation. Direct grants. So direct grants are handled a little differently than fee waivers. So when we process a fee waiver, and it is a county fee waiver, The department actually has the ability to transfer funds from the equity or the local jurisdiction assistance grant program account directly to that department to pay the fee waiver for the awardee. With direct grants require a different type of processing altogether in the county. So direct grants have a separate application process, and they will for the local jurisdiction assistance grant program. They are going to require a grant agreement, just like they have for the equity grant program. They will require the applicant to submit W-9 tax paperwork. They're going to also need to be processed through the Cobblestone system, the county's contract processing platform that some of you are probably familiar with by now. Awardees will receive direct grant fund payment via a county check, and a county issued check that will be sent through snail mail, most likely. And the processing timeline for direct grants is generally about 6 to 11 weeks from the time that they're approved and the check gets sent out to the awardee. So it's a little bit of it's quite a longer timeline. Fee waivers, because we don't have to do a grant agreement, right? This is county agency to county agency fee waivers. They don't require a grant agreement. They don't require the W-9 paperwork. They don't require processing through Cobblestone, right? I'm bringing this up and it will become more relevant when we have more conversation about fee waivers. But I just want folks to be aware that as we're going through the slides and then we're having discussion, later in the meeting, that we'll be talking about these timelines in a few places, and they're relevant to hopefully the information we're trying to get from the public. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what assistance, meaning Sql requirements, means. It means that direct grant funds may be used for activities such as hiring consultants or other professionals that are necessary to help you complete any studies or prepare, right, your required Sequa documentation. For cultivators and nursery operators, think Appendix G Sequa checklist. If you are a CFBL holder, right, what Sequa documentation do you need to move your permit forward and or to meet the state Sql requirements? For many folks, it might be biological surveys, archaeological and cultural surveys. It could be traffic studies, air quality and greenhouse gas emission studies. There's a long list, and so I think that this is pretty broadly categorized, but really looking to help folks meet those Sql requirements. Specifically, there has been some funds are available for assisting operators with improving air quality and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. This is really, I would say, primarily targeted at folks who are off grid and are relying on the use of internal combustion engines, such as generators, water pumps, but all types of internal combustion engines, and trying to assist with the conversion over to renewable resources and get people onto hopefully electric powered, solar powered machines to do the work that they need machine assistance with. Remediation and relocation to an environmentally superior location. Direct grant funds will be available for assisting applicants that need help covering the costs associated with moving cultivation operations to an environmentally superior location. Might be moving from one place on a parcel to another to get outside of a streamside management area. I don't think that there are limitations to how this might be used. I don't know that it definitely would limit you to staying on the same parcel if there's a pathway, say through ordinance activities and phase 3 perhaps, from staying on the same parcel, but really looking at any kind of remediation and relocation support that folks need. maybe they've already conducted the relocation and they need still remediation support. Okay, projects related to hydrology and water quality. So direct grant funds can be used to assist with Department of Fish and Wildlife, lake and streambed alteration agreement projects. This is really from the beginning to the end. So if you're in a position where you still have notification expenses and or need to, say, re-notify for some reason or another, and it's going to accrue notification expenses, they're eligible for funds. So is technical support. If you need technical assistance for the development of your lake and streambed alteration agreement or an amendment, or even maintenance of that lake and streambed alteration agreement. And I'm sure plenty of folks have projects outstanding that need to be conducted to ensure they meet the requirements of that lake and streambed alteration agreement. Sometimes those lake and streambed alteration agreements or other causes create state water resource control board requirements, such as Clean Water Act permits. And then everyone has the all cultivation permits have the general order to consider and are likely required to be, are likely required to be engaged in the general order. So there might be filing fees, reporting and monitoring fees. There might be water requirements such as having to install specific water meters. And then, of course, technical assistance. So if you are just entering into the general order and or need a 401 permit, you might need some technical assistance in those permitting processes. Same is true for water resource, North Coast regional water quality programs. If you still have compliance projects or need technical assistance with meeting requirements through there, that is available. Also, some folks have water availability analyses that are outstanding and that are going to be triggered by their activities, perhaps. So connectivity studies, if those are necessary, groundwater availability studies, technical assistance, professionals in assisting you with getting those accomplished. And then also we're through the direct grant program looking forward to funding water conservation efforts. This is a pretty broad topic. There's, examples might include rainwater catchment infrastructure, fee deferrals for permitting water infrastructure, extra forbearance tanks for surface water diversions. I think we're open to proposals. Water conservation is a big part of the water and hydrology and water quality section that we put into the direct grant program. Okay. That is it for the presentation, and we have gained 5 minutes. So I want folks to know that the criteria is the criteria that we just ran through for the direct grant and the fee waivers. We purposely tried to craft it in a manner that was broad, right? So if you don't see your project or your desired project or the projects you think you're going to have on your plate in there, it doesn't mean that it's not going to be included. And so what we're trying to figure out today is not all of the minutia of the multitude of different variations of projects that might fit into the categories that we just discussed, more so thinking broad strokes. So qualifying criteria for direct grants and fee waivers, right? In order to qualify for a direct grant or a fee waiver through the local jurisdiction assistance grant program, folks are going to have to, at minimum, be in good standing with their embossed receipt or have an annual cultivation permit or have a valid CFBL, Cannabis Business Facilities license, because you have to be permitted locally, right, or authorized to operate, and have a valid provisional license, because the entire basis of this program is to assist folks with meeting their Sequa requirements so they qualify for annual licensure. So we have to tie, the project that you need assistance with to your Sequa requirements, and that it will assist you with getting that annual license, okay? So minimum criteria to be eligible at this point would be the permits, local permitting, and valid provisional license. So in this first section, I think what we want to do is see if folks have thoughts about any additional qualifying criteria that we should consider when developing the program, and or questions or concerns about the qualifying criteria, minimum criteria we've laid out here. So with that said, I need to stop my screen share for just a moment, which I think you guys are going to see all of my stuff in the background. No, you're not. Okay. I need to find my timer app. My apologies here. So this is what I would like to say. My timer app is not handy on this computer because I used it on my desktop. That is the problem. Okay. So I am going to run the timer on my phone. My apologies. Okay, let's go back. We lost the screen share, didn't we? Okay, give me just a minute here. Okay, great. We're back. So my apologies that we don't have the timer. It's not going to be able to show up on the screen. But I do think we need to use the timer to make sure that we get through as many comments as possible, right? And we're going to run the same way for each of these. I apologize. I'm working from home today, and I am running 2 different computers. So I'm going to set a 3-minute timer, and we'll see how that goes with getting through everyone. I will set a 3-minute timer, and we will start taking comments on qualifying criteria. I want to remind folks that if you'd like to make a comment, please do raise your hand. If you're on the Zoom app, the raise hand feature is located in the toolbar. If you're dialing in or using your phone, you can press *9 to raise your hand. We'll work through folks who have raised their hand, and then if there's additional comments in the Q&A feature, we'll spend some time discussing those or pointing those out and providing some insights on those if possible. So with that said, Michael Katz, you are our first speaker, and I'm not a host, so I can't do anything. Nina or someone, can you make me a host, please, at my personal email? Oh, thank you very much. All right, technology. I still can't do anything with Mr. Katz.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Can you hear me?
We can. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for holding this meeting. Definitely appreciate it. Certainly the community and the timeline to get this out originally in the application process, there wasn't a lot of time to go into it, and there were certainly a lot of questions. Certainly we noticed that obviously out of the 17.5 million, 10 as you identified are directed towards direct grants. And the remaining 7 or so million is directed towards program expenses. And so I guess what I want to ask globally is, it had been indicated in the application process that there would be the possibility to identify the most effective uses of these funds and potentially adjust the application parameters. And so I was wondering, this is a process to find out what should be added. So what is the actual process that would be undertaken to revise the application and the allowable uses for the grant funds in result of this meeting?
I can answer that quickly. I don't know, but it's probably on DCC's website. in their instructions. And so that is not necessarily the topic we have in front of us today. Do you have comments on minimum criteria for qualifications for a direct grant and or fee waiver through the program?
Well, related to the direct grants, I do believe that it's a good start in providing uses related to Sequa. I also believe that there are other potential uses. So regarding not necessarily qualifying criteria, this slide, but the actual allowances, certainly there would be use for assistance with county fees and other costs to construct F1 and AVA compliant structures for commercial activities as required by county code interpretation as well. So that would be one specific recommendation I would add to the direct grant allowances.
Okay. Any additional comments? You still have 48 seconds.
No, not at this time. I'll pass the mic. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, Nina, someone else, you have to do the controls, please. So if you could remove Mr. Katz's permission to speak and then pass it on to the next person. I no longer can see who that is. I think it's Susan Tibben, perhaps. Okay, Susan, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Kristen. And thank you for doing this meeting. I was particularly interested in the eligibility in terms of water conservation, best practice in terms of energy use, etc. But it's not entirely clear if we're looking at a farm that is on the grid. In other words, not necessarily using generators. Would they be able to apply for instance, a solar array or a catchment system? What is your take on that, Kristen?
I'd like to speak after.
And Paula would like to make a comment after mine. Thank you, Kristen.
Thank you. Paul, I'm going to reset the timer for you. Okay, Paul, you have the floor.
Okay, so this is not a Q&A. I get it. So the direct grant is for Sequa only. And how are we to apply if there's been no movement on our Appendix G and are not sure what's required? And I'm wondering if the water board, our operation was small enough that it did not require a water discharge agreement. It was waived. And they recently, actually just last month, changed their rules. And now I've got to pay $185 for what I used to get for free. And they'll do, I don't know what they're going to do for that, but would that be allowable? Since it's in North Coast, it is a local thing. It's not a statewide thing, even though it's a state agency. Would water board fees be allowed to be included with the fee waivers? So that's, I thought you were asking questions and answering them, but those are my comments, and I'd love to know if it's possible to get an answer today.
Yeah, thank you, Paul and Susan. I don't know the answers to all of the questions. Water board fee waivers are not possible because even regional water quality control boards, they're outside of the county agency system. They're not part of the unincorporated government agencies. So they would have to, they are eligible for funds, but they'd have to be tied into a direct grant. Same as in local equity, just because of the funding mechanisms and the way they work. But we'll talk about that a little more in the fee waivers section, I think. Okay, let's go ahead and, okay, I now have controls. Paul, Susan, you still have a little bit of time left.
Yeah, well, I was just wondering if you knew the answer to how do you apply for a grant if it has to be directly related to your Sequa and moving on to an annual license if your Appendix G has not been resolved and you don't know what you're going to be needing?
I think that there's ways that you'll know, right? Especially if you had a sensitive species habitat review. But a lot of these programs are based on ordinance requirements. And so you'll know as you're going through the permitting process in a lot of cases. So not necessarily tied to the Appendix G. The Appendix G just recaps what's in your permit. Okay, any additional comments? We've got 15 seconds left.
Yeah, and then Susan was asking about the solar arrays. If you are on the grid, to improve your greenhouse. I
don't know the answer to that. I think that's something we would have to explore at that time.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you, Kristen.
Thank you so much. Okay, let's see here. Interesting. Okay. Our next caller is Monique Ramirez. And Monique, I am going to allow you to unmute. So you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you, Kristen, for having this meeting today and taking our suggestions and also questions. One of the things I was hoping to get clarity on is about the improvement of water systems. If somebody would like to add extra water storage, but it's not necessarily...
Ooh, you cut out.
extra, for the future potential...
Wait.
Okay.
If you would back up, if you'd be so kind, I'm sorry, your reception cut out. So what we heard is if someone wants to improve water systems, but it's not necessarily required, and then you cut out. Do you mind starting from there, please?
Yeah, sorry. I'm on satellite, so not the best reception today. Yeah, I was just wondering if people want to make improvements to their existing water infrastructure, if that would be an allowed use, or if it's something that has to be, I just would like clarity, I guess, on that language. And then another thought that I had was reading the slide that you talked about if a person needed to relocate to conform to not creating, a sensitive species habitat issue. It just raises the flag to me about the ordinance in general, which we've all been wondering this whole time about SSHR issues for applicants and not being able to do the remediation because the way the ordinance has been written states that the person would be denied. And so this highlights that there is a pathway forward for that remediation, especially with the direct grant opportunity. And I just have a big concern about the eligibility for applicants that are an embossed receipt holder, but may find themselves completely out of this portal even before it fully launches if these notification letters are getting sent out for, for instance, tree removal and the vegetation modification issue. And then later on, they might be able to use these sort of direct grants to help mitigate or remediate these sites, but they'll be out of the program and then not be eligible to even apply because now they are no longer an embossed receipt holder. And because we know that this program is just launching and is going to take time to develop, I think that we need to think about that in terms of our plan currently for the applicants that are in the portal that may find themselves in a denied position, but later on there could be funding to help rescue them. So I just want to bring that to your attention and hopefully we can incorporate that into the proposal moving forward and helping everybody. Thank you so much.
We are going to talk about vegetation modification during Friday's meeting. So I just want to put that plug out there. I think it will clear up some of the questions that Monique raised. And then I do have some more research to do on relocation. I want to look at some state codes, but I think there's a couple different ways funding might be applicable to remediation and relocation activities, not just on parcel. So we're exploring it, and we'll get some more information out as we learn more. Okay, with that said, I'm going to go ahead and move to our next caller. And I think our next caller is, looks like someone who's called in. Last four digits of the phone number appear to be 8254. I went ahead and allowed you to unmute, caller from 8254. Let's see. Caller from, okay, ending in 8254. Maybe I can, let's see, maybe I can unmute you. It doesn't look like I have that option. Okay, let's go to some of the Q&A. We have just a couple of minutes here. Okay. For those of us who have been ahead of getting these studies done, will grant funding be made retroactively? I don't think we know the answer to that. In general, a lot of these programs have not been eligible for reimbursement programs, but we still have some questions, and that is one of them. Septic systems, will septic systems be eligible? That's a great question. I am not clear on that either. But thank goodness we get to keep these questions and they're exportable, so we will have them to consider as we're looking at shaping the program. Let's see. If we have 4 owners to an LLC and are applying for 1 cultivation license, can all the owners apply for grants? I think that's the next topic, to be honest with you, right? So how are the grants applicable? Are there any sort of restrictions? I don't think we know the answers to that, but I think we need some input on that for sure. Do we need to list projects in our Appendix G paperwork to be eligible for LJAGP? No, you do not. It is not just limited to what's in your Appendix G paperwork. There are a lot of projects such as water conservation that aren't going to be listed in your Appendix G paperwork, but definitely help to improve the conditions at your cultivation site and are eligible for funding and are in alignment, we believe, with the LJAGP direct grant program. So let's see. I don't know that I understand that question, so we'll skip over it. What about annual license holder that needs to complete the signed LSA agreement? Yes, absolutely. So expenses associated with your Department of Fish and Wildlife Lake and Stream and Alteration Agreement, those are eligible for local jurisdiction assistance program direct grant funding. That could be your notification. It could be finalizing your notification and needing technical assistance to draft or craft the permit materials, the permit application materials. It could be the projects that you have to conduct to maintain compliance with that lake and stream and alteration agreements. So let's see here. We can do one more. Is there any way that some of the common side roads that are being used by licensed farms but are out of scope of those farms' LSAs could receive upgrades? Probably not. That would probably be a stretch because it would be outside of the requirements for the permit or the state license. So, will there be tax implications? I absolutely believe that there will be tax implications. I think if you're getting a $50 or a $60 or $100,000 or less, right, less than $50,000 direct grant, I think the same taxable income triggers are likely to be in effect for this program as we've seen be in effect for local equity grant programs. So I don't think this program changes that taxable income consideration. Okay, let me. Okay. Oh, goodness. Okay, let's do the next section. And we will go back to public comment. So maximum award amount for direct grants, what do folks think that maximum award amount should be? I think we're really open to and understand that there may be projects that are relevant to your Sequa requirements that are in excess of $50,000 perhaps. There are no limits currently in place by the state, right? But some things to consider. The local equity grant program allows for direct grants of up to $50,000. And those direct grants are paid up front, which means you are approved for the grant and it goes through the processing in the county and a check is cut for the full $50,000 if that is what you would like to have occur. And then you come back to the program or the department with your receipts to essentially balance your grant agreement out at the end of that grant period. Other grant programs pay direct grant monies in arrears, which is more of a process that works like this. The applicant applies for the grant and is awarded for the grant and then starts the grant projects and then in increments such as quarterly increments or 6-month increments provides receipts for those projects and then is reimbursed from the grant fund for those projects based on the receipts they provide the entity that is awarding the grant, right? That's called grant programs with payment in arrears, right? So that's another option to consider. Any direct grant that's awarded in the county in excess of $50,000 must go before the Board of Supervisors for approval. So for example, if the LJAGP direct grant maximum dollar amount were to be $100,000, any direct grant applicant seeking more than $50,000 in grant funding from the LJAGP would have to have their application go before the Board of Supervisors for approval before that grant can be processed as an approved grant. So just a consideration for discussion. With that said, I think we should go back to public comment. We'll open up public comment for until 4:30 on this topic. And we had a caller in the queue previously. Dan McDonald, you have your hand up. So folks, please do raise your hands if you would like to make a comment or use the *9 feature on your phone to raise your hand and we will go through and hear public comments. So Dan, I have allowed you to talk and you should be able to unmute. You do have the floor.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'd just like to second, I think the first caller, Mr. Katz, that it would be great for the money to be available for constructing ADA compliant bathrooms and even potentially commercial buildings for any commercial needs. Another question I have is PG&E is 2 parcels away from me. And I was wondering maybe as far as getting on grid, using that money to get power poles set and bringing it over to the property. And those are my 2 questions.
Thank you for the first consideration. We will note that comment for sure. And then the second consideration, I think that it's likely that PG&E service could be covered by the grant. I think we have to look specifically at the project. But the power source for most of Mendocino is Sonoma Clean Power. So I think it's definitely worth considering. Yeah. Okay, anything else?
Nope, that's it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. You please remute your microphone, that'd be great. And I'm going to, there we go. Okay, doing a little bit of maintenance here. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and lower that hand. Okay, our next caller or commenter on this topic is Monique Ramirez. Monique, I have gone ahead and given you permission to unmute your microphone.
Thank you so much. Just for clarity, so in this slide, it's saying that the direct grant that exceeds $50,000 has to go to the board. So that's also considering if you were eligible under the current local program. I just wanted to make sure I understood that correctly first.
Any direct grant issued by any department in the county that is in excess of $500,000, that grant application needs to go before the Board of Supervisors for approval. It cannot be approved by the department.
Okay, because I was just thinking like this is one program and then this is going to be, on top of what we already have. So, I think that it depends on these projects. I could see an LSA. I don't have an LSA project myself, but I know many farmers that do in our CCAG group. And some of those projects are going to cost them well over $100,000 to, upgrade culverts and bridges. So although it sounds like a lot of money at $50,000, I'm not sure that can really get people to the finish line with some of these really large environmental remediation projects that have to take place. But I do have concern around the tax implications. I'm struggling as a cottage operator right now to just pay my bills, and I'm going to be getting the equity funding from the existing program. And I don't know how I'm going to come up with the tax money at the end of the year. I might not even have enough sales to even pay for the tax. So it's something that I'm really concerned for all of us in this program. And I don't feel it's the spirit of what these grants are intended to do, is to cause us other financial hardships and cause us to lapse on our taxes by taking the funding. So I really encourage the board and the program to really investigate possible solutions for this, because it's going to be an issue as these dollar amounts get higher and higher that people accept. But I would advocate for at least a $50,000 an amount for each awardee that's eligible, and potentially more, maybe up to $100,000. And because there is over $10 million to distribute, and if there is a possibility that we can amend the total amount of the 17,000, like Michael Katz was asking earlier, that would also give more funding to the applicants and maybe tailor out some of the other expenses that are being allocated so we can just help more farms. So that would be my recommendation.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, our next speaker will be Susan Tibben. Susan, you should be able to unmute your microphone.
Thank you, Kristen. I'd like to just briefly echo and second what Ms. Ramirez just spoke about. It's really become a devil's bargain for many of us, because if we had an extra 14, 15, 16,000 put aside to pay taxes, we wouldn't be applying for an equity grant. In addition to that, the timeline seems to be stretching and stretching and stretching. And people are very concerned that the timeline from the state has been changed from the end of February to the end of August. And so people are very nervous if we're going to be waiting, another 2, 3, 4 months. I know this isn't solvable right now, but I certainly hope that the board looks closely at this situation. Thank you.
And I would like to add, if I could.
Yes, please.
I'd like to echo everything that Mo and Susan were talking about with the taxation. If they had the money to begin with, they probably wouldn't need the grant. And that dovetails into the other thing that you were talking about with getting payment in arrears. You don't, if they had the money to take care of the thing to begin with, then getting reimbursed, that's not an equitable solution for people that are struggling to begin with. And so if you gave them the money, then they could take care of that. They should be able to make an allowance in their direct grant budget for the extra taxes that the grant would impose on the applicant. And they should be able to modify their agreement without having to go through the whole cobblestone thing once they have their money. If things change, if situations change, priorities change, as long as they're admissible or eligible items, they should be able to be jockeyed around. And I don't understand why there's a pushback to that happening. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Okay, our next caller, let's see here. My apologies, let's do this. Our next caller is Michael Katz. Michael, you should be able to unmute your device.
Yes, hello. Thanks so much. I wanted to echo Paul's comment about the payment in arrears. I think that understanding the level of challenge that is happening right now among our community, that we certainly should not be putting that upfront burden on grantees, and that we should ensure that folks are able to receive the funds, pay them out, and then submit receipts. I think that would certainly be more beneficial. And I want to clarify, understanding that this is a much larger sum of grant money than on average, understanding a $50,000 grant might normally be a cap out that would require board involvement, but understanding the board's significant interest in reducing the amount of their cannabis engagement, I wonder if there's a way to discuss with them the concern about this and to be able to globally address what happens if we are providing grants that are higher than 50 grand for this program. And then finally, I think another great idea that was inspired by Paul's comments were the idea of having a grant amount, but also then including whatever the taxes that may be owed on that as part of the allowable grant as well. So as not to be deducted from the grant funds, but as to be included. So say in the example of a $50,000 grant that may wind up incurring $14,000 worth of taxes, perhaps the full grant amount should be the grant plus the tax liability that is incurred there in order to truly help these operators transition into their annual license.
Okay. Thank you so much for those comments. Appreciate it. Let's go here. Let's see. Our next caller is, and I lost your name, Brittany Massaro. Brittany, you should be able to unmute your microphone. Although I don't know if you have audio. Let's see here. Maybe. Okay, Brittany, there you go. We can hear you now.
Thank you. And again, as everyone says, thank you so much for these meetings. I represent my family who's been doing this for 40 years. We are in a portion that is super rural, and I don't know if I had missed this on other seminars that we have done, but we do fall into one of those categories, as Monique stated, where our road work is going to be around $300,000 to be in compliance. And we are searching for grants through CDFW as well as the State Water Resource Control Board, but this is the first time I've heard that we can apply for direct grants exceeding $50,000, and we already have our grant applications in. And within those grant applications, we budgeted only to ask for $50,000 through Mendocino and look for other funds elsewhere. Is there an area where we can go back and amend our LEAP grant to ask for more money, or is this through another program? And I'm sorry for my perplexedness. This is...
It's okay. So Brittany, we are talking about a program in development. We're talking about the direct grant program that's associated with the local jurisdiction assistance grant program that the state awarded the county of Mendocino with in December. So this is a new program we're talking about developing. And we're wondering what the maximum grant awards should be for the new program.
Understood. Thank you for clarifying.
You're welcome. Any more comments? Any further comments, Brittany?
Nope, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. We are at 4:30. I'm going to stop this timer so it doesn't ring for us all to hear. So let me do a little maintenance here. And we'll move on to the next topic. And so it does seem like there was some confusion about equity program versus LJAGP. That might be because we mentioned local equity program on the slide, and we did that just to provide an example of direct programs we already have and what the limit is, right? So we had kind of a starting place to have a conversation from when discussing what the maximum award amounts might be for a local jurisdiction assistance direct grant, right, that an awardee might be receiving or interested in applying for. I also really appreciate the comments about in arrears. We do recognize that there's a lot of financial chaos and stress out there right now as folks try to navigate the legal marketplace and its challenges. So I really appreciate the comments about in arrears versus upfront. Let's move to the next section to get some information on. When the local jurisdiction assistance grant program was developed, they used a couple different sets. The state used a couple different sets of criteria for eligibility, local jurisdictions to be eligible for the funding. Local jurisdictions that were eligible were in the top, right? I want to say 25% or so of the number of provisional licenses the state had identified as being within that local jurisdiction, right? And then there were additional points, so to speak, awarded to the local jurisdiction if those licenses were within, they were cultivation and nursery related, and they were within sensitive ecological regions of the state that brought additional points to Mendocino. And then there was an additional criteria when they were assessing local jurisdictions. Does the local jurisdiction have a local equity program? This almost doubled the award that was brought into Mendocino. And that amount is accounted for in the direct grant program. We've actually said, okay, the department needs a lot of assistance in automating and staffing, right, in order so that we can meet the timelines that the state has placed on transitioning provisional license holders into annual permits, right? We do need that assistance. And so we took the funds that were not related to the point system for local equity eligibility. We put all of those funds into direct grant programs. But additionally, the state is curious and we'd be interested in learning from the community about any types of benefits that the local jurisdiction assistance grant program could provide to those individuals who have been certified eligible for equity by the county. That could be, I mean, I think I want to hear creative creative ideas, right? Any idea, all ideas. But, you know, could certified equity applicants, or should they be eligible for additional grant funding, right? More so than other folks, I don't know, right? But we want to hear public comment about what sort of benefits this program might be able to offer specifically to certified equity applicants. Again, please, if you want to make public comment for this section, do raise your hand. It's in your toolbar if you are on the Zoom app. And if you're not on the Zoom app, it is star 9 on your phone. So we have a few folks that are ready to make comment. We're doing pretty good on time. I'm still going to use the timer for 3 minutes. I've been using it and most comments have been a little shorter. Our first commenter today on this topic is Michael Katz. Michael, you should be able to go ahead and unmute your phone and start your comment.
Yes, hello. Thank you so much. So yeah, regarding the equity component, it is a very interesting conversation. What I recall is that the initial amount of grant funding that was awarded to Mendocino was about $7.5 million for this program. And then $10 million was allocated because of the scale of our equity program. And so that's part of the questioning behind the allocation of the full 17 million, because certainly the fact that we received 10 of the 17 million because of our equity program indicates that portions of that money should certainly be prioritized and directed towards equity applicants, but that the additional 7 million in funds wouldn't just be going, I think, in the eyes of the community to the program, but also support those members of the community that are not equity applicants. And I understand that there is not a requirement for that $10 million to be spent specifically on equity applicants, but because that's the foundation of those funds being allocated to Mendocino, I think that consideration should certainly be given to how to, prioritize and support those folks who have been disproportionately harmed by the war on drugs. Right now, we're looking at, maybe 20%, 25% of our active licensed population is in the process of being deemed eligible. So it's clear that a lot of folks are impacted by that, but we have a lot of folks who aren't, and they are just as challenged, if not more so, and not more so, certainly, but just as challenged. And so that's part of where that conversation comes from. So I do believe that equity should be given additional access and support, but I also think that we have to support all of our operators and really evaluate how the full funds are being distributed accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, our next caller is going to be Monique Ramirez. Monique, I have given you permission to unmute, so you should be able to unmute your device. There you go.
Hi. This is a great question. I'll just speak on my own personal experience, like going into the equity program and applying, and then realizing later on during that process that we were going to have this other opportunity for assistance specific to Sequa needs. And because the local equity program has way more allowable uses for your business, I went ahead and removed some of the water storage stuff that I would have liked to have added, with the hopes that I could use it during this grant funding opportunity. And so I would definitely like to see the county support people that are funded under the local equity grant to still be eligible for this, because that equity grant was for the war on drugs. Like, I definitely went through the whole court system and had to deal with a raid and all of that. And so I was a victim of that, as well as most of the people that have been applying for that. And it's a separate kind of grant. So I think we should keep them separated, and especially because the funding is somewhat different, and be able to still let people use this funding opportunity that's before us now for Sequa compliance. So that would be my recommendation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Let's see. I have a very bad dog scratching at my door. I'm sorry, you guys, it's distracting. Okay, our next caller is going to be Susan Tibben. Susan, you should be, and Paul, Hansberry, Paul, and Susan, you should be able to unmute your device and start your comment.
Thank you, Kristen. I'd like to yield my time to Paul.
Yes, I think that any efforts to make allowances for paying the taxes that this is going to incur would be greatly appreciated, not just for the equity, but if there's only a carve out for equity applicants, then at the very least that, but it should be able to have an allowance for the taxation that the equity would create.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else, Paul, Susan?
No, I think that's it for now, but thank you very much.
Thank you much. Okay. Our next caller is Corinne Powell. Corinne, you should be able to unmute your device and start your comment.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I am not in the equity program, and I understand that is a particular set of circumstances, but I think that each applicant for the direct grant program we're discussing now for local jurisdictions should all be treated equally for the criteria of this, as it is a distinct grant. I think that we have benefited all in our receipt of additional funding because we have an established equity program in the works right now. But I am very concerned, as I have heard from other equity applicants, that the process was extremely difficult, often changed, not really knowing many details. And I am on my knees asking that we have good instruction for applicants for this particular grant program, so that we don't relive some of the difficulties of the equity rollout. I'm also very concerned to know if at this point in time there is the ability to present back to the board and readjust some of the MCP admin portion of this grant that you have now taken out of the offerings. I mean, you've completely eliminated talking about the original total grant, and we're down in the $10,000 category for actual assistance to the folks trying to get through the Sequa process, which also has changed several times. We don't know where we sit with that. We don't know what's happened to the concept of the consultant. MCP wants to do further submissions. Are they going to take over what has already been done by accountants? Is there any use of these funds to pay the accountants that now are not part of the MCP intended Appendix G process? There's a lot going on that has removed potential funding from valid local jurisdiction applicants. And a lot of that money is put into various categories by MCP, developing a program that may or may not have any bearing on the way that current qualified applicants can get through the Sequa processing. That's the objective of the grant. That has not been obvious in the way that the MCP has distributed the funding available. So I'm hoping that
next time. I apologize.
Okay, hoping there's more time to address that.
Thank you for your comments. Okay, we are at 4:42 and we have no further commenters on this topic currently. We could take another comment if someone wanted to raise their hand, but we have a few things in the chat that we can roll through over the next 2 minutes. A lot of folks support some sort of, it looks like, benefits for equity applicants. Could grant funds be used, local jurisdiction assistance grant funds be used to upgrade any high pressure sodium lights into LED lights to reduce greenhouse gas emissions? That's a good question. I imagine that it's probably applicable for licensed indoor operators. So I think that that's something to consider. A note on taxes. The tax payments, there's no pathway in this grant program to allow income taxes to be taken out of this grant award. It doesn't fit into the criteria. It is something we're exploring, whether or not income taxes in the equity program can be, right? The income tax associated with receiving the equity grant award could be covered by the equity grant award. We are looking at it over there. But this grant program itself, the local jurisdiction assistance grant program, is not broad enough to offer that type of allowance in its scope of language. At least we don't believe so at this time. I do want to move on to the next slide. The next slide is fee waivers. This I thought was important to talk about because, again, going back to some of the earlier conversation, when we are looking at a fee waiver for a county permit, we can actually process what is more like a gift certificate, which we call a fee waiver, right, in the equity program. And basically, we work with the applicant under that program to identify the amount and the permit type that they might need from a different county department, such as Planning and Building Services or environmental health, right? Or the cannabis program. And that is really a pretty quick process. It can be done in a minimum of 48 hours. Like we approve it, it can be done and paid for in a minimum of 48 hours. And please, when you do comment, please try to hold your comments about the equity grant program, because we have regular meetings about that. And I can just want to reassure everyone that we are in the process of doing an overhaul of how fee waivers, specifically inter-county fee waivers, are processed. And we'll be expediting those. We're taking them over. This is what I can tell you there. So please do hold your comments on that, because we have some good news coming up for equity specifically. The point of this conversation is just helping folks understand that inter-county fee waivers for this program too could be expedited in a fairly quick fashion, because they are an internal transfer system, so to speak. There's not the need to go through a grant agreement. Now, when we get into paying fees that are for agencies outside of the county, we have to go through the grant process. So it does require, just as a reminder, a grant agreement, W-9 tax paperwork from the applicant. It has to be routed through Cobblestone. I forgot to put the timeline on here. I'm so embarrassed. Awardees receive the fee amount. If we just said, there's a little grant for agencies, agency fees outside of the county, they would receive that fee amount in the form of a check. The timeline from award to getting through the Cobblestone and grant award process is pretty lengthy. It can be anywhere from, I would say, about 5 to 8 weeks. That is from approval to getting your paperwork uploaded, to getting this, go through the review, and then getting the signature, and then processing the check and the agreement through the auditor's office, and then mailing, right? It can take quite a while, which can be a bit painful for fee waivers. When the fee is due, the fee is due in most cases. So I know that this has been a bit of concern. So I wanted to see if folks had feedback, suggestions, input about fee waivers. There's a number of fees that can be included that are related to Sequa requirements. So I wanted to make sure that we had a moment to comment specifically on fee waivers. This could be the process or the fees that might be included. Again, when I say fee waivers, I'm thinking of the inter-county system where we can basically do a gift certificate transfer, right? Quick, painless. Anything that's going to out-of-county, outside of the county agencies actually needs us to issue a check, which then turns into an agreement with the awardees. So we have a few commenters on this topic specifically. We appreciate that. If you want to provide a comment, suggestion about fee waivers and how we can help folks with payment of permit fees through this program, we do hope that you will raise your hand. Again, if you're calling in, you can use the *9 feature. So please do raise your hand if you'd like to comment. Our first commenter is going to be Michael Katz. Michael, I have allowed you to unmute your microphone, so you can go ahead and begin your comment.
Great, thanks so much. I think the fundamentals are pretty clear, and thank you for that. But this has raised two different questions for me. One of those is, as far as the receipt of the full funding, the $17 million, is that something that comes to the county in one tranche? And if so, is that something where those funds can actually be earning interest that can then be reinvested into the grant program? Because, just having $17 million sitting around, I'm sure there could be ways that that money could be used to improve access and provide more resources. And then that led to the other question of the timeline of the funding distribution. So I understand that we may not be able to see applications for this until July. And obviously the timelines, once those applications go in, anywhere from 5 to 8 weeks or 11 weeks, depending on fee waivers or payment. And so is that deadline for July for applications? Is that when you're expecting both fee waiver applications or direct grants, or is there one that might start earlier?
I think we don't know at this point, Michael. I think July is ambitious for direct grants because we have to develop the programs and we have to get the platform set up and we have to make the application materials. But if we can do it earlier, we'll do our best to do it earlier, but I think we can probably get it done by July.
Great. Do you know about the funds as far as like where they sit and how, like what happens once they're distributed? Each local jurisdiction receives 80% of the award and then has to conduct quarterly reporting. And so, they will move into the county as a check in the 80%, but then they have to be allocated. There's a whole internal budgeting process. So we won't have access as a department to funds for a few weeks or a month-ish still. You have a little more time. Any other questions? I'm good. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you so much for your comments. Okay. Our next speaker is going to be Susan Tibben and Paul Hansberry. I have allowed you to unmute your microphone if you'd like to go ahead and start your comments.
Thank you, Kristen. I'm wondering if it would be possible for our program to communicate with outside of county agencies to explain that we are all hobbled by cobblestone. And so to give applicants a little bit more of a window. We're very, very grateful that these permit fees can be paid to outside agencies. But if we have to come up with the money because everybody's down on their knees on the cobblestone, it really doesn't help anybody. But if Mendocino County were able to communicate with various outside agencies to ask for a little more time so that everybody's timeline was a little bit more in sync, is that something that we could do?
Okay, it's a good suggestion. Go ahead, Paul, please.
Thank you. I'm wondering, since this program apparently is extended through 2025, would the fee waivers be an ongoing thing? If it was a repetitive thing, like a permit that had to be paid annually, would that be able to, so you could pay it through 2025 for the duration of the program? Or is there going to be a time limit of 12 months, much like what we're hearing from the equity program? And the second part of it is, I was wondering, I was very interested in what the answer to Michael Katz's question about where the money is. If you got 80% of it, is that sitting in a bank account? Or is there a way that could be utilized to try to generate more funds to increase the pot for the program?
Great, thank you for that. Let's see here.
So we don't know.
Our next caller is going to be Monique Ramirez. Monique, you should be able to unmute your microphone and start your comment.
Thank you. I just am really hoping that this fee waiver process will be fast and streamlined after you guys have learned so much from the current equity grant program and its implementation. So I'm really hopeful that you guys can put this all together, not just for the fee waiver, but also for the direct grant, and get things launched maybe even sooner than you guys are anticipating right now. But one of my questions is, if an applicant, we've always been told that these grants are not able to be used retroactively. So my question is, if a bill is due within the county, but we know that these people are not going to get any funding until possibly the earliest, probably, at least at the end of the summer at this point, to not incur like an additional penalty fee or something like that. But and if there is a penalty fee because the applicant chooses strategically to wait to pay the bill and use the fee waiver for it, could the fee waiver also pay for the fees incurred by a penalty that they may get for not paying on time? So sorry, that was kind of said in a lot of words that I probably could have condensed, but I hope you get what I'm trying to say. It's a long day today.
Yeah, it's towards the end of the day too. But yeah, that's a great suggestion.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, great. Let me go ahead and manage the timer quick. Okay. Our next caller is Dan McDonald. Dan, I have allowed you to unmute your microphone, so you have the floor.
All right. Yeah. I was just thinking it would be very helpful to get a comprehensive list of all possible fees that you could apply for a waiver on, and just to be able to look at that and maybe see a total of how many, what it all adds up to, and maybe even, you know, compare that with the amount of people trying to go through the portal. And I'm just wondering why there's so much money for these fee waivers, why the fees aren't just waived. And this money is available, you know, it just, this step of applying for it just seems like it's going to leave more people behind than maybe what the money was intended to do, which is help people through this process. So I'm going to mute myself and take the answer off.
Yeah, that's an interesting concept. I mean, I think, you know, is there a way to vastly streamline the process by saying that we've calculated how many Appendix G fees, right, the applicants and permit holders might have over the course of the next, say 12, 17 months, right? Because you're supposed to submit your Appendix G by June 30th of 2023, right? So in this example, and can we just set that aside and be like, okay, fee waivers for all on Appendix Gs, right? Easy peasy done. Everyone qualifies. That's a really interesting concept. It would be much easier to do with department fees than other departments' fees, because I don't really know who still has, say, like building permits that would be applicable, right? But I think we could have some conversation about what that might look like, especially for Appendix G fee waivers. Also, you can't use local jurisdiction assistance grant program funding for permit fees, such as your renewal fee or for your state license. So those permitting fees and licensing fees, permit renewal fees for your commercial cannabis operation, those are not eligible under the state's structure for fee waivers in this program. So it's a little bit different. And so, but I do think we can look at what MCP fees are applicable to everyone and crunch some numbers and see if we can streamline something like the Appendix G fee for all. I mean, that's a appreciated concept. We did get some questions about Cobblestone, and I think it is worth explaining what Cobblestone is to some folks before we close today. Cobblestone is the county's contract processing platform. It's an electronic platform, web-based, and every grant agreement that the county approves, whether it's for $500 or $50,000 or $500,000, right? It is going to be uploaded. That grant agreement is going to be uploaded after it's approved by the department or the board of supervisors into the Cobblestone platform. It takes about an hour or so to get the grant agreement and the materials for each agreement into the Cobblestone platform itself. Once everything's uploaded, a review process is triggered by the person uploading the materials into Cobblestone. And then it goes to 12 different individuals for review, starting with myself. So William uploads it, it shows up in my email, I hit accept, and it goes off to county council next. And then county council reviews it, and then they hit accept, and then it goes to the next person. This is part of what makes the Cobblestone process fairly slow, is that while it has to go to 12 departments, it doesn't go to all of us at the same time. It goes to us in a single file order, right? So if I don't approve, it doesn't go to the next person. If risk doesn't approve, it doesn't go to the next department, so on and so forth, right? Once everyone has accepted the grant agreement, read it and accepted it or approved it, it then goes out to all of those same departments again for signature. That happens simultaneously. So then everybody signs it. Then we have the awardee sign it. So then we have to figure out electronic signature, have someone come in and sign it. And then we upload it into Cobblestone again. And then from there, it goes to the auditor's office, where the auditor's office does an additional review of the grant agreement. This happens via Cobblestone, and acknowledges essentially that a grant has been approved by all of these departments and executed by the awardee and the various departments, and that a check is going to be requested from the department for the amount in the grant agreement. Once the auditor's office signs off on all of that, we receive a notification that we can process the check with our weekly check batch. We do a check batch processing, check batch once a week. Usually that is turned in by Thursday each week, and it's everything from payroll to department expenses to grant awards go into that accounts payable processing that we then file with the auditor's office. The auditor's office then takes about 7 days to process all of the checks we submit to that accounts payable process. Okay, so that entire Cobblestone process may take 10 weeks, give or take, right? So it is somewhat lengthy, but every grant award, regardless of the amount, will need to go through that process. And it's not just a cannabis department thing, it's countywide, and it's part of the fiscal checks and balances in place in the county that meet legislative requirements for local jurisdictions or local governments in managing contracts, contract procurement, and grant agreements. So it is part of how we meet fiscal responsibilities that are set forth in legislation. So it's not as malleable or easy to change as one might think. That timeline has multiple departments, but then just the platform itself is requiring some legal obligations the county has. So with that said, I think this has been a great meeting. I think we're going to have to digest the comments and the information that came in, and then meet with the community again. So we want to thank everyone for attending and joining us. I want to thank staff for helping host and make the webinar available to the public. It will be available on the county's YouTube page, so you should be able to find it there if you want to reference it in the future. I apologize we didn't get through all questions and comments, but we do appreciate all of the comments that came in, and we will reference them as we're putting more energy into developing the policy manual for this program. So thank you so much. I think we can go ahead and close the webinar. Thanks, everyone.